All right, folks, how you doing? Hope week one went well. And let me know if you need to talk or meet or check in on course content or your progress. All right, let's dive into week two. All right, agenda. I want to highlight some of the assigned readings for this week and what you can look out for and talk to you about annotation expectations. Look at the key points at some of the action research and focus group readings that are suggested but not required, because I really would like you to take a look at these three focus group studies that I've listed in number one on the agenda. Some tips and ideas for focus groups. This will apply this week, but also next week, perhaps in week four as well, but I'm sharing them now and I'll share them again next week. Suggested readings on different types of action research, a review. Memo number one will be due at the end of next week, as well as part two of the signature assignment. All right. So first thing I want to go through is the required readings that I have listed. I found three studies that I really like that have used focus groups or have examined the nature of focus groups. This first one in particular is looking at the nature of empowering student voices through activities, especially looking at higher education students, and using activities as a method to elicit more conversation, more voice, and more participation. So what you'll see on the next three pages are questions for you to consider as you annotate. For this week, three articles, three studies, and I want you just to put three annotations that stand out to you. You don't need to, it could be a comment on someone else's annotation. It could be a question, comment, or idea you have, or it could be just three of your own original annotations. I've put questions here just to spark some of your thought as you go through the readings. Second reading is looking at the nature of empowerment. And this article kind of does an overview of some studies that say they empower participants through culturally responsive methods, but they challenge some of these previous studies and they conceptualize empowerment and then do their own look at what empowerment could look like in their study. So again, a few questions here. Third article, this one is really solely dedicated. It's a large research study out of, I believe, the Yale School of Medicine, qualitative exploration on risk and protective factors of substance abuse among young Black adolescent girls. So really interesting study just from a few years ago, but I think it's good to look at why did they use focus groups instead of interviews? Why was this a good approach? So I do want you in this article in particular to look at their methods, look at their recruitment, how did they develop their data and work with it and make sense of it? And then also in the results and findings sections, think about how many quotes or selections did they use from the focus groups to back up or substantiate their findings and conclusions. All right. Moving on. Let me go back. Sorry, I skipped a page here. Two suggested readings on focus groups. Week one, in this class, you read chapter one from Coughlin and Brannick, looking at focus groups, doing research within your organization. I put these two readings as suggested readings, knowing in action. Chapter two and then chapter three, I'll get to in a moment. Some of it is theoretical and looking at metacognition, like why do you do action research, thinking about your positionality and your thinking as a researcher. So I didn't want to require these this week. And again, it is a short course. So what I've gone ahead and done is summarized it for you, just a few of the key points, thinking about the difference between knowing and action. When you're really into action research, it's in the moment, it's current, and it allows you to think about what are some of the outcomes or solutions that your organization or the institution already engages with, and how might you be able to change those. And then, of course, reflection is always a good part of action research, any type of research, thinking as you're going through the process, asking questions about what you're doing and what's happening around you, what might be happening within a focus group or other aspects of your research. All right, it talks about this idea of authenticity as a researcher, being attentive to data, intelligent in inquiry, reasonable in making judgments, and responsible in making decisions. I think this part's important, being aware of cognitive distortions, especially when you're looking at data on making observations. Just be careful of overgeneralization, all or nothing thinking, mental filtering that might be processing through your own schemas that you have, jumping to conclusions, um, emotional reasoning. I like to think of that maybe more. I could have called it subjectivity, um, fortune telling, future tripping, kind of projecting what might this say in the future without just staying in the moment in the data and misperceiving something that's said. So that's why sometimes it's good to triangulate and perhaps have someone else look at the data with you if you have questions, or following up with someone you've interviewed or focus grouped with. Hey, you said this. I was wondering if I could follow up and understand what you actually meant by this. Journaling and memoing is just important to help you be reflective, keep your records, to check your interpretations, to even check how the research might be impacting you since you're invested in it. Um, the chapter talks about second person skills, the importance of building relationships, listening well, and having a range of ways to interact with others. I have a spelling error there. And then also as an insider researcher, thinking about how can you combine your advocacy or your desire for change or to improve something with inquiry and being open to new ideas, because we know you have ideas. We all have ideas of what change we'd like to see, but just being open to what the data shows or what participants offer. Maybe they even critique your ideas. Chapter 3, this one is kind of a little more theoretical, so the summary is a little bit less here, but it reviews that, it says action research is a way of practical knowing. It's in the moment, it's related to things that are important to us and related to our work. It's concerned with the practical in particular, not the theoretical and abstract. Um, and it values collaboration with those who you are researching with, not on. Kurt Lewin, I believe back in the 50s and 60s, he was one of the originators of this idea of action research. And these are just a few key points that are summarized on his thoughts, that these are change experiments on real problems. It's iterative, so it's not just a one-time research thing. Um, it's intended to change patterns of thinking and actions, especially in places where there are well-established ways of doing things and folks may not stop to question, is that the best way to do it? It challenges the status quo, and it's interested in adding knowledge to social science, but also improving social action in the life of individuals and organizations. Other characteristics here, it's kind of, I don't know, repetitive, iterative in this chapter, but characteristics of action research and researchers: solve a problem, contribute to the science or to the literature. It's interactive, collaborative. You develop a more holistic understanding. Um, and while we're focusing on focus groups this summer, it can include all types of data gathering. It's not just focus groups. It could be interviews. It could be studying artifacts. It could be geographical or spatial analysis. Um, it can involve a lot of things, definitely surveys and quantitative work as well, some sort of mixed methods. All right. And then the last part of the reading really just goes into the philosophy of action research and different types of action research. And I'll get to that. There are more suggested readings on types of research. All right. This reading was a little more practical in terms of how you're planning your focus group study. All right. I think one of the key things that I want to point out is don't start with the questions you want to answer. Oh, this would be a good question to ask. This would be a good question. I can't wait to see what they say to this. But think about the purpose and the problem. Why are you actually doing this, and what kind of information do you want to gather? And then you can go to specific questions. All right. When to use focus groups. You're looking for a range of opinions and ideas and perceptions. Perhaps you're trying to open up some ideas around well-established processes that need to be interrogated, um, uncovering factors that influence opinions and behaviors. And sometimes it's good just for idea generation to help you generate your ideas and further your hypotheses. Think about who you want to involve and how many focus groups you need. Some of these tips are for a bigger study for the sake, again, of this summer. You're just looking at one focus group. But when you're thinking about your problem of practice, maybe you want to do 2, 3, 4, 5 focus groups with different groups of people. We'll get to that in a moment. One key word that'll come up, but to think about, is saturation. Basically, this is the point where you've heard the range of ideas and aren't getting any new information. You'll definitely hit saturation in your literature review, and that will be a beautiful moment where you're like, thank God, I don't need to read any more on this topic. I can just finish writing. Because folks, things start to repeat. So saturation is a good thing. Be aware of it. All right. This is a little bit of a deeper dive in this article, thinking about different designs of focus group. But the two that I want to point out is single category design. That's really just one group of individual rich participants. You just have one focus groups. They know a lot about the topic or the subject or the idea, and you want to further understand their ideas. Multiple category. This is with different types of participants who may have input on a certain topic. So let's say school setting. You might want a focus group with students, parents, teachers, administrators, community members. If you want to get that insight on one particular topic. The other designs, you can get into more depth in a qualitative methods class, perhaps talk to Dr. Weiss, Dr. Bingham about that. All right. Think about this again, kind of jumping ahead, thinking about questions, but think about the flow of the focus group. Awaiting our introductory period. This is when they can complete the consent form. Perhaps you have a short demographic survey or a few survey questions you'd like to gather as well. The introduction is important to set norms and processes and to set a tone. Also to remind them anonymity. This is the purpose of the focus group. It's aimed at, addressing this issue. I really value your input. It's important to establish that safety and concern and purpose at the beginning. Warm up. I hate icebreakers. I think I said that in the writing workshop, but you do need some get to know you questions. Maybe a basic, could just be introduction, could be their connection to the topic. It could be just, tell us your role in the institution. If folks don't actually know each other, non-controversial. The idea is to have everyone talk. Then you can transition. Perhaps there's easy opening discussion questions. Then you want to get to your key or your core questions. What is the information that you really want to know? All right, this should be most of your time. And then at least one closing question. It could start with you like summarizing, hey, this is what I heard today. It's really interesting. I thank you for participating. I heard X, Y, and Z. Is there anything else you want to add on this topic? Perhaps anything that I didn't ask that you could share or that you want to tell me more? Or as you were listening, what were some of the connections you saw? Or is there anything you heard from a peer or a colleague that helped you think again about what you believe? And then a wrap up and a thank you. A note here, this probably comes up later in the slide deck. The intro warm up transition. When I've done a poor job during a focus group, I spend too much time on this. I think 40 to 60 minutes. Once you get over 60 minutes, that's really long. But keep track of time and do not spend too much time on the intro, because then you'll get rushed and you won't get to your P questions. All right. If you need to probe a little bit further, here are just some examples of how you could kind of gauge for deeper thinking from the participants, to restate or rephrase, to ask them to extend. Oh, could you tell me a little bit more about that? Who else was there? things like that. Uh, Inner events or inner thinkings. What thoughts did you have about this? Can you share your opinion? All right, so there are ways to probe further because sometimes if you're in a group space, people might be more reluctant to talk or not feel as safe. It might not be about you as facilitator, but who folks are with. So think about grouping as well. Here's some other tips. I probably shared some. Safe setting. Also come as a stance as a learner. I think that establishes some of the safety and trust. Um, Open-ended questions, neutral, singular. So nothing that's like double-barreled. Like, hey, can you tell me about how you felt about this and what you wanted to do about this? So if you have questions that basically have two verbs, two asks, split it in half, or just choose the best thing that you want. Avoid yes, no questions, multiple part questions, keep track of time, have a backup recording. Um, Take notes if you want to. That's optional. I usually like to, but I tell folks, I'm not writing your name. I'm just jotting down some ideas so I can follow up with it later. Make notes of your impressions and the nonverbal communication that you see. This could even be immediately after the focus group. Um, what's the feel? What's the vibe of the room? Challenges, distractions, uninvited participants or no-shows. If there's a power differential in the group, an administrator and a teacher, something like that. Or it could be based on age or just some other category. So think about that. Maybe a group's not talkative, or there's someone who is taking up too much airtime. The airtime piece, this could be established in norms. So think about, you want everyone to share. You don't have to answer every question, but just be mindful if you answered first on one question, maybe be mindful and let someone else speak first. Again, don't take too much time with early questions and be mindful. I did a Platica recently where it almost became a gripe session. Some teachers complaining about their administrators, and it was hard to reel it back into the core. So just kind of think about that because sometimes if it is a animated topic, it can turn into a gripe session. So just think about how you might want to address some of these challenges. These I'm going to move through quickly. I'll talk about this more in week 3, but here are just some ideas, some phrasing, some questions you can ask during the warm up. All right. Um, as you're working through the focus group and as you are wrapping up as well. So these are some suggestions. All right. Different types of action research. This is on the explore section of the learning content page, but some of you indicated that you would like to read a little bit further on particular types of action research. So there's a short article on participatory action research, one article on youth participatory action research or YPAR, and then I put in 2 articles about appreciative inquiry. So that is there. Next week, I'm going to share with you two action research dissertations. One is on participatory action research, a group of adult educators together. The other one's on YPAR. And then I'm going to share 1 or 2 pieces of my work that was PAR, but PAR light. I'm going to say LITE because due to timing. I was hoping for more participation, but it just with schedules and everything. All right, one of your written pieces this week is to start memoing. Memoing, journaling is just an important part of the research process. So for this first one, um, I want you to tell me about the theoretical framework that you chose to explore in Module 1. Remember, I asked you to read 2 articles and to think about it. So here are some questions. And again, this is all going to be on Canvas as well. Prompts. And I really just want, 1 solid paragraph on each of the articles that you read. Just telling me, and just if they're on the same framework, you can connect them. You don't have to answer all these questions, but it's just to spark your thinking. I've attached really, it's a 2-page reading on just what are analytic memos. So this will be linked to the assignment as well. All right. Signature assignment part 2. This is drafting a plan for engagement and your focus group protocol. All right. By protocol, I mean a draft of a release statement, a welcome and closing script. I think it's important to just have a script, especially at the beginning, to read, my name's Jason, I work with you, or it could be I'm a researcher at Cal State Channel Islands. I was really interested in hearing your opinion on my problem of practice. I'm looking at X, Y, or Z. Thank you for being here today. Um, Let me tell you what's going to happen. I'm going to have you sign a consent form. Anonymity is preserved. I'm going to record it, but it will be password protected, things like that. I'll ask you about 4 or 5 questions. I hope all of you can answer. And then stop. Are there any questions before we get started? Things like that. But it's important to have a script that you read and you aren't riffing. All right. And to have a draft of your questions. All right. The prompts are here. That's going to be in your assignment. And what will also be linked. So what I have here, these are 2 examples of focus group questions and one protocol that I did during my dissertation studies. These will be linked. The one on the left, I had done a study on revising or looking at the teacher evaluation process. So these were questions that I was asking evaluators, department chairs, administrators. How can we refine the process? This protocol, this is the one, I remember I sent an announcement recently. I'm sorry that you can't use this data for your dissertation, but the work that you do for this class could be adjacent. So this particular protocol, I was looking at the experiences of Black staff and faculty at the school, the predominantly white school that I worked at, just to kind of explore their experiences. And then from the responses I gathered, I was able to hone in on these ideas of belonging and institutional and leadership support. Belonging is something that seemed elusive in this whole DEI framework, that belonging was absent, and wanting something more in depth as opposed to superficial. And then how are leaders being supportive as well, as opposed to just going through the hiring process, stopping there. Okay, go to work in an institution that has a lot of norms, well-established practices, etc. Okay, I'm rambling. So there are 2 examples, one of a full protocol, 2 examples of questions. I put consent forms here. The one that I did recently for a few practicas that I did with some of my colleagues, some work out of Cal State LA. You can look at this. I mean, literally these documents, if you want, you can kind of copy and paste and make them work for you. The one on the right is a longer IRB, research information sheet, that I used for my dissertation. I assume that Channel Islands is going to have some models that you can use, that you can use. So I just wanted to share these examples with you. All right. So again, a little review. 3 required readings. They really are, I think, interesting studies. So I hope you dive into them. There are suggested readings. I've summarized some of them in here. 2 assignments, memo number 1, signature assignment, part 2, working on the focus group protocol, and the recruitment plan. For that, I don't have an exemplar to share with you, but I just want you to write a paragraph or so. Like, how do you plan to recruit? Who are you going to reach out to? Are you going to email? Are you going to call? Do you already have 4 people in mind? Who are you going to reach out to? So just a paragraph. It could even be some bullet points. Again, this class for me is about process, and just kind of even learning your own organizational skills and dynamics as you prepare for the bigger problem of practice. All right, office hours, please come see me, or you can make an appointment if these times don't work for you. All right, I will make myself available for you. Thank you very much, and talk to you soon.